Thank you for the introduction. So I'm Dwayne. So we could go ahead and skip to the next slide. Okay, so for this, because it is an online webinar, and I like to have the audience participate. So what we're going to have you do is basically go to slido.com on either your mobile device or desktop machine and enter the event code E563. If that could also be put in the chat window, just so for those who are late joining us can go ahead and join. But Slido is essentially an interactive tool that's used for webinars as well as live presentations to get instant feedback on a topic within a presentation such as this. You could go to the next slide. Yeah, so at some point we'll come back to that. So just want to jump right into the presentation. So as Brian said, that this presentation is really an intersection of the two fields of survivability and cybersecurity. My background since 2002 or beyond, before I even knew what cybersecurity was, is cybersecurity and computer science. So I wanted to start this presentation with kind of a definition of cybersecurity as is usually used in the field. Basically, it really boils down to three tenets. CIA. Everybody has probably heard of the CIA triad. If not, you will today. So confidentiality is the C, and basically, in summary, that is the means by which you can keep information private from unauthorized participants. Integrity is basically can you trust the information that you either receive or are getting ready to download or send? Availability is, as its name denotes, can you have access to information or an information system when you need it? Authentication, the process of basically verifying the identity of a user online. And then once they're authenticated, what are they authorized to access? And then the last one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is non-repudiation, which is basically an intermix of authentication and integrity. Essentially, it's used to ensure that someone cannot deny that they've either sent or been a participant in a particular conversation online. So just setting the stage for what cybersecurity is and what it's been known to be in the community at large as a baseline for the rest of the presentation. Next slide. So how is cybersecurity done today? I just wanted to get an idea, give you an idea of like how we do cybersecurity today. And I will jump back to these top level concepts to demonstrate why they're not working. And I will hope to prove that they're not working. And the whole motivation for this presentation is as a result of it not working in the way that we think it should, there's arisen a need for a different way to look at the cybersecurity problem. And survivability, I really believe, gives us one way to do that. Clearly, it's not the holy grail, but we hope to educate you as to the approach that we think is very effective in this space. So compliance. Everyone is pretty familiar with the risk management framework or its predecessor, DIAC. So these are basically compliance standards, which are regulations, policies, rules, requirements, laws, so to speak, in the cybersecurity space that stipulate what an organization has to do to either get a system, a network, or application connected to an information system. Within the DoD, we call it the authority to connect to either the DISN, which is the backbone of either the SIPRNet or the NIPRNet, which are DoD information networks, or any commercial network has similar standards, PCI DSS for the payment card industry, FERPA for the educational industry, HIPAA for the healthcare industry. So these are standards that kind of govern a particular body that is working in a particular space, especially as it pertains to protecting information that is sensitive in nature. Next slide. compliance is usually a one-time action. I'm going to come back to that later. When compliance fails, if compliance fails, cybersecurity has another related area called intrusion detection. Intrusion detection essentially is a mechanism by which you detect intrusions after you have your infrastructure in place. So it's usually deployed an intrusion detection system passively in such a way that it does not interfere with traffic that's coming into your network or going out of your network, or even on a host, because there's also host systems get into the different. But what it allows you to do is, based on a signature, or in some cases, an anomaly based on a previously defined baseline, detect an intrusion that you can then have a response to respond to that particular intrusion or proposed attack. It's very passive in nature, reactive as well. I'll come back to that one as well. Next slide. Patching. Everyone is familiar with this term. So how patching usually works is a new patch is available, you acquire it, test, deploy, review deployment, and then basically the cycle starts again. There was a study conducted where about 200 IT professionals were asked the question about their patching policy within their particular organization. 80% basically said that there was their organization had a patching policy in place. 55% basically thought that they had a good visibility of what their company does in terms of patching. And then far be it from me to say anything bad about Microsoft on this webinar, but one of the companies I like to use in presentations is Microsoft, because I learned very, very early in my career that Microsoft, what they do with their operating systems, however many versions it put out since I've gotten into the field, is they put a roughly 80% solution out there, and every Tuesday, I don't see any hands raised on the online webinar. But if I polled the audience and said, okay, how many of you know what happens on Tuesday? Most of you would say that there's patches that are released by Microsoft every Tuesday. And they're able to do that because they have a large part of the market share. So they don't have to put out a fully vetted solution. They put out one that's close to what we need, and then they patch every Tuesday. So as a result, 80% of the poll, as it pertained to this survey, said that they have issues with Microsoft as it pertains to patching. So what was very interesting to me was statistics here that aren't as clear. Of the 80%, basically, all of them said that it either takes up from 8 hours to 48 hours a month to actually institute the patch, or patches within their organization, which to me is really a lot of wasted time. And then 55% of these respondents also said that they give their users administrative access, which, as you know, allows a user to go outside of the applications that were originally installed on their machine. So as a result, I'm not sure accurate are as it pertains to an organization have a really good patching policy. But we're going to continue to go on. So next slide. 2002 or so, I started in the field, and this is one of the concepts that was introduced to me soon thereafter. So it's actually a perfect almost diagram or concept to denote layers of defense in the event that one layer fails. So as this diagram shows, you have the outer network, which is your outer layer, which is the network. Then you have platform security, application security, data, and then you're supposed to have a response action where our intrusion detection fits. One of the things missing here is the people layer. 90%, if you Google the statistics, 90% of cyber attacks are actually caused through some form of social engineering or phishing attack. and there's variations of those as well. And so, even though this diagram really elucidates a really good concept as it pertains to protecting your infrastructure holistically, the layer that's missing, and that's obviously missing, as usual, is people. Next slide. Okay, and then the last kind of overview of how cybersecurity is done is digital forensics. So inevitably, your protections, even if you have defense in depth in place, will fail. So digital forensics comes into play after an attack has occurred, and you're trying to basically answer the who, the why, the what, the how, the where of a cyber attack. So I like to think of it as basically, if you've ever seen the show CSI, after a crime has been committed, the forensics team comes in and basically gathers evidence, analyzes the evidence, and makes some assertions after the end of the show about who did it, why they did it, etc. So digital forensics is very, very, very similar. And it's actually a good place if anyone is interested in getting into the field of cybersecurity to start, because it introduces you in good digital forensics courses or programs to all of the aspects of a computing environment. We'll go into that a little bit later. Next slide. How is it working? So if you turn on the news any day to CNN or any one of the other major news channels, even as it pertains to the most recent election, cybersecurity protections as we know it today are epically failing. And there's reasons why, and then we'll go into some of those a little bit later. But some of the statistics I gathered for this presentation are on FBI's most wanted list. There are, as of last week when I checked, 42 criminals that have a cybersecurity hacking history on FBI's most wanted list. Mobile malware is on the rise. That statistic was taken from 2017. And believe it or not, that statistic actually went down in 2018. And the reason why is because of the third bullet. Third-party app stores host most mobile malware. So basically, all of the recent malware attacks, most of the malware has come because of the ubiquitous use of mobile devices, whether it's in the federal government space, academia, or commercial sectors. It's all the same. Identity theft, we've all gotten notification about signing up for credit monitoring services and those types of things. I actually had my wife had a newborn recently. We had a newborn, and it's funny that a lot of newborns are getting their identity stolen because they're not really using their credit and things of that nature until they're of age. So identity theft is something that is very rampant and will continue to be a problem. The Internet of Things, every home probably has some form of a smart device that is increasing the landscape of cyber security attacks. The average cost of a data breach is also rising. And then as it pertains to the U.S. government, the U.S. government is actually spending more money on cybersecurity, which is good. But at the end of the day, it's also an indication of the state of affairs as it pertains to cybersecurity. The United States is the #1 target for cyber attacks, targeted cyber attacks, it should say. So nation states against nation states, the United States is up there on the list of targeted country. And then by 2023, the United States will account for half of the breach data by 2023. And so I can't actually see the slide here, but the average cost of a data breach in the United States is almost $8 million per data breach, which is double the U.S. Level of cost of a data breach, which is an indication of how valuable the assets are within our United States. So just some statistics to give you an idea of where we are. It certainly isn't an exhaustive list, but it kind of shapes this talk and other talks that are very similar. Next slide.
Can I ask a question?
Please do. Yes.
Okay. Everything you've talked about has been from the perspective of IT.
Okay.
Almost nothing you've talked about deals with industrial control systems. In other words, you know, ships, pipelines, power plants, grids, you name it. Almost none of it is relevant.
I agree. Uh, but there are definitely statistics as it pertains to that. But from my company's perspective, we really focus on uh, enterprise security to an extent, but more so like embedded platform security. So I kind of designed this presentation uh, around that kind of general area, but certainly happy to give another webinar that focuses on that. I'm actually going to be at a presentation in a couple months that focuses exclusively on ICS SCADA type systems. So definitely a relevant, pertinent question. Unfortunately, kind of out of the scope of this particular presentation. But happy to talk
Okay.
to you offline.
Yeah. No, okay. My questions are no longer relevant.
Okay. Well, and hey, this is Brian. Just a quick interjection. We did have one question submitted via Skype already, and that's great. I would encourage other people, if you do want to kind of put your questions in the queue, to do it in the Skype conversation, or just don't mind it. I assume, Dwayne, you don't mind if we interject with some questions here
Oh, no, please do.
there, but if we do, but I was specifically going to try to set aside a few minutes towards the end for Q&A. So if you do have some you want to save them to the end, we can do that, and you could do that through the Skype app as well. So just want to make sure that's known.
Yeah.
Okay, continue, or you want to ask the question?
No, go ahead. You can continue. We'll come back to the Skype question later at the end.
Okay, so this is true in every industry, whether it's ICS, enterprise, or tactical. There is a shortage of cybersecurity professionals and people basically trained to do this type of work. And I would even say the gentleman, I think it was Joe Weiss, that was asking the question, that I would say it's even more challenging in that particular space. Because what you're finding is that there's a lot of people with cybersecurity background. There's a lot of people with operational background in a particular area for platforms even that we're doing cybersecurity assessments and things of that nature on. And within the ICS space, as an example, there's a specialty associated with those types of systems as well. And so there's a cadre of reasons as to why there's a shortage. But the fact is, ISC squared, which most of you have heard of, who have heard about cybersecurity in general or work in this field, there's a lacking of close to 3 million workers, and this was conducted as of 2018. So a very recent survey was taken, and this was across the United States. The shortage. So the shortage is not improving. There are a lot of cybersecurity programs being stood up, but again, who are they being designed by, and who's who are actually taking advantage of these educational programs, as well as training or transitioning from other fields like engineering or computer science. So there's a shortage. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, I have one slide to talk about that, is not the only answer, but it helps us in this direction because it automates a lot of the things that are redundant in the field. But at the end of the day, they're very nascent as applied to the cybersecurity survivability space. So we still have a challenge as it pertains to that. Next slide for me. So why is it not working? I spoke about some of the lack of domain knowledge as a general reason as to why things aren't working. But let me go back to some of the things that we talked about earlier. So compliance, as I know it, usually focuses on checking the security boxes, as I mentioned, for within the DoD anyways, your authority to operate. The funny thing is, most of these standards, to include risk management framework, have basically a step-by-step process as to how you conduct the particular audit per that standard, but all of them have some measure of continuous monitoring. But compliance standards are usually applied once to get your box checked. And if there's not a regulation or regulating body that requires you to get authorized every single year. So think your driver's license. When's the last time you've been called up to do another driver's exam, right? So compliance standards and the application thereof work the same way. Patching does not really prevent against zero-day attacks. There's been some research and advancements in this area, but not as it pertains to patching. But patching in and of itself does not prevent against zero-day attacks, which are attacks that occur before the patch is available or the vulnerability has even been discovered. Defense in depth, as I mentioned, one of the main layers that's always missing is people. And we are always the weakest link. Again, I'll state whatever industry you're in, a lot of these attacks occur not because of a technicality or a technical malfunction or even a technical failure. It's really because we as humans are very trusting. And as a result, defense in depth has to include the people layer, which is where we often fail. Digital forensics and intrusion detection, both are very reactive. Intrusion detection operates after an intrusion has taken place, and digital forensics actually takes place after an attack has been successful. So both of these are very reactive in nature. So these are just some of the reasons why cybersecurity protections are not as effective as they should be. I won't say failing because we are making progress, but at the same time, we're far from where I believe we should be in the nearly 20 years I've been in the field. Next slide for me. Okay, so I'll pause to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. So is artificial intelligence the holy grail? Is it the answer to all of our problems? So artificial intelligence is really a domain, a hierarchical concept that is used to denote, usually people are talking about machine learning, but also these are some of the other areas that they might be talking about. Pattern recognition is usually used in the phishing context to detect spam and other types of email attacks. Anomaly detection, I mentioned it earlier. Really quick, if you're able to baseline your organization's traffic or user activity, you can basically, using some machine learning techniques, you can basically detect when an aberration from the norm is identified. Natural language processing, it's actually used a lot more in the intelligence space and outside of the cybersecurity space in general, but we use it on our phones every single day. If you're talking to OK Google or Siri, that's a form of natural language processing, and it's applied in the context of human and some of the other intelligence operations to date. Predictive analytics basically takes data that is known or information within the data that's known, whether it's metadata or other types of information, uses that to make predictions on what might happen in the future. So similar to like how the stock market works, I was big in Bitcoin trading. So those types of algorithms work in that space very well, and they're now starting to make their way into the cybersecurity field as well. So it's popular enough to have a mention here, but as I mentioned before, the application to cybersecurity issues is relatively new. When I say relatively new, within the last 5 years. Next slide for me. Okay, so let's get into the rest of the presentation. Survivability is a concept that was actually new to me before I came to service. I just thought they didn't know how to spell the name. But it's really comprised of 4 areas: detectability, susceptibility, vulnerability, and recoverability. So I'm going to get into the parallels between cybersecurity and this in the next slide. So we'll skip over this one really quick. Okay, so traditional survivability has those four elements. So as it relates to, and I won't read them to you, cyber survivability, uh, we saw a clear parallel, and we just really wanted to present this and start a dialogue around this concept that could be applied to, uh, especially within the DoD, mission-based issues as it pertains to cybersecurity attacks. So detectability, really quick, is an inability to avoid private information disclosure. Susceptibility, the inability to avoid being attacked. Vulnerability, anticipation of an attack, or the ability to withstand attack. And then the last, recoverability. Uh, I'm hopeful most of us have heard of disaster recovery plans or continuity of operation plans. So those are the types of things that fall within the line of recoverability. What I'll say before I take a quick look at the poll to see where things resonate is that these aren't really new concepts. And we'll go to the next slide to try and convince you of that. Okay, so why does cyber survivability work? And this is where I usually lose people. So I briefed this like a couple times since, and this is where I usually lose people, and people start to really throw things in my direction on stage. So why will it work? We can all agree that we assume that attacks will occur, right? It doesn't matter what sector you're in. We know that once you're online, you have the potential to be attacked, right? And if you have the potential to be attacked, there's a potential for the attack to be successful. We all agree on that. In the context of the DoD or even a business where you have business objectives, right? It focuses on mission or your business objectives. It's not really focused on attack prevention, but on mission or business objective completion. And then last but not least, it focuses on preventing the actions on objectives. The cyber kill chain, which I don't have a diagram for it here, but basically is a step-by-step process that enumerates basically the stages of a cyber attack, starting from the reconnaissance stage, which is step 1, to step 7, which is the actions on objectives. So once all previous steps have succeeded, 1 through 6, what happens? What is the attacker really after? Are they after information to steal? Are they after a system to deny access to legitimate users? Or are they just looking to deceive? Basically feeding legitimate users information that cause them to make erroneous decisions or decisions based on bad data. So, these are kind of the actions and objectives that usually are the result of a successful cyber attack. So survivability really focuses and in this space. Let's go to the next slide.
And quick interjection here,
Yep.
Brian. Just for everybody else in the line, could you please make sure you're muted unless you wanted to chime in and ask a question, just so we don't get any feedback or interference. So, all right, back to you, Dwayne.
Okay, so before we go on to this, I'm gonna give you kind of a update on the poll that we asked. So I asked, what is the most important aspect of cyber survivability? So of the 139, it was 146 before we started. Participants, 31 have voted, and 32 have voted. There's 70% of the voters have actually said recoverability is the most important thing. So if we can jump to that, because we only have, 5 minutes, Brian?
Yep, thereabouts. I want to leave time for
So detectability, I mean, you'll get the slides. So if you have any questions about the other 3 areas, we can talk offline, or you could basically just review the slides and ask me if you follow up if you have any questions. So I actually agree to an extent. So recoverability is something that takes place after an attack has actually occurred. So in the traditional sense, we usually employ continuity of operation plans, disaster recovery plans, or system backups. Baltimore City just got hit with ransomware. I don't know if you all are familiar with it. So I have a friend who works for the city, and he said basically instead of paying the $76,000 that was asked from the adversaries, the mayor said that they will not pay, and they will wait 3 weeks to recover from the attack. So system backups, the best way to probably ask questions, I just saw the pop-up, is through the chat window. I'll stay behind for anybody who has questions. So system backups are one of the ways to recover from like a ransomware attack. But at the end of the day, how much are you really spending instead of paying the money? I'm not advocating that they pay the money, but there's some issues with the traditional approaches that we've talked about. So in the case of survivability, we will always assume that an attack will occur. So in the case, we can draw some parallels as to how we can approach the problem. And I want to reassure you, these aren't really new concepts, all of them, to you. These are things that are available now, but it's really takes a shift in your mindset before we could actually start to address problems in a new and innovative way. So if you assume that your system or network will fail, how would you plan? Right? So you would add redundancy. So one of the concept that is very popular is resilience or fault tolerance. So these are concepts that have been around for a long time but aren't really employed as it pertains to cybersecurity. These are more survivability concepts or resilience or fault tolerance. And then the third bullet is use failover protocols to prevent secondary or tertiary attacks. So those are kind of like newish concepts, but they're different approaches. Can you go to the next slide really quick? I'm trying to wrap up. Okay, so as I said, cyber survivability is not a new concept. It's really just a new term that falls in line with resilience and fault tolerance. Resilience is basically if you have an attack of any sort, your system is still able to perform as intended. Fault tolerance is basically if you have a failure, mechanical or otherwise, your system will still perform as intended. So there's an intersection between all of these three fields. So it's not something new that we're introducing. We just want to bring to bear an awareness of the fact that you can really do cybersecurity in a different way. Next slide.
I have a comment, if you don't mind if I step in real quick.
Please do.
So this is Jeremy Dolan. I'm one of the data protection specialists for Dell EMC. I cover the DoD, and we are working with customers right now that are experiencing the same thing. And what they fear, like you said, is recoverability. How do you recover from it? Well, Dell EMC, if you looked at the stories and everything that you've seen before, like with Sony, and there's examples with Maersk and everything like that. Mm-hmm. Sony, for example, they were, when they got attacked, they weren't attacked on the front end, they were actually attacked on the back end first. Yeah. So when they got attacked on the back end, they didn't realize, and then they attacked on the front end, and then when they went to say, all right, we're just going to back up or restore everything that's in our backup, they didn't realize that all that was already corrupted and already gone. So what we did with them, and what we've done with all the financial industries, and also we're working with the defense agencies right now, is put in what we call an Airgap Solution. It's our cyber recovery solution. And basically what it does is it's a data domain that we provide you that sits in a vault that will sit off network. That's air-gapped from your network, only goes online when the data is, or when you need to back up the data onto that golden copy, and then it will shut off the network. So it's truly preventing you guys from being attacked if your backups were attacked, being sent to that vault solution. Mm-hmm. Now, if the data is sent there, for example, that ransomware does get sent to there, it has a verification method built in that will actually delete that copy and resort back to the previous, as we say, gold copy. So I'd like to get this information out to you guys so we can discuss more around it. I think this will be really beneficial for everyone to see how Dell EMC does it today, and how we can help, prevent this from these attacks from really occurring. Again, you're absolutely right. There's no way to really prevent them, but how do we restore from them when they do happen is really the key way of getting back up and efficiently, not waiting three weeks like you said, with like Baltimore said that they were going to do. How do we do it and just avoid ever having that conversation with them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's really the mindset that we want to put in people's heads, that you have. I don't want to sound like an Avenger movie, but more power than we really think we do.
Yep.
Because we know our environments, we know our systems, we know our applications, or we should, better than an adversary. So if you plan with that in mind, I believe the solutions will start to follow that new paradigm shift in how we're thinking, and that's exactly an example of that in practice. So I appreciate that share. So with that, I mean, I can't really come up with a better example than that. We have run out of time, but the last few slides are basically giving you kind of sample mission goals. So as I said, these could apply to business objectives, mission objectives, or any other objectives that you have. In the context of a mission, why I like to present mission examples is because there's always a finite amount of time in which a mission needs to take place. So you don't really need protections that fall outside of that time frame, as an example. So if you have questions, please feel to ask, and happy to answer them online now or offline until about 1 o'clock.
Yeah, let's take a few moments if you don't mind, Dwayne. We'll go through a couple of questions. I think at least one on slide. Yeah, go ahead.
Brian, this is Steve Warzala from CSIAC.
Yep.
I just wanted to mention, one of the folks earlier was talking about ICS. I just want to mention we have a lot of information on the CSIAC website regarding ICS and compliance, RMF, operational technology. So I just wanted to mention, that's an available resource if folks are looking for information in those areas.
Right. No, yeah, and that's a good reminder. I mean, for anybody out there, for any follow-on questions you might have, in case I didn't mention it earlier, one of the chief services we provide as the IAC is information research. So between the two of us, CSIAC and DSIAC, any question you have on this topic of cyber survivability, we can help with. So check out our website, submit a question to us, see what kind of information support we can offer.
Yeah, we've done webinars on those topics. We've got podcasts, journal articles, reference documents. So like I said, on the CSIAC website, there is a lot of information available, and you've got the technical inquiries. We can help with that. So. Like I said, just wanted to make folks aware of that. Thank you.
Thanks. So, Dwayne, the first question we got was on Skype. What resources would you recommend for cybersecurity on aerial platforms? So, cyber for aviation.
Yeah. So there's a number of organizations that gather kind of publication, news policies on aerial platforms. One of which is IATA. So if you go to www. Let me type it in. IATA.org. They're a really good organization for aerial platform specifics for aviation platforms. Somewhat related to the second question, embedded systems, FPGAs, and those types of things. There are a number of initiatives going on within it, specifically the Department of the Army, that I'm aware of, dealing with FPGA security and the issues thereof. So the formerly CERDEC, It's now actually called the C5 ISR Center, has a Cybersecurity Information Assurance Division, under which there's a tactical network protection branch that is, and its sister branch called the Crypto Modernization Branch. They're doing extensive research on FPGA security and embedded device security. So we service engineer and work alongside with that community very closely. And a number of our cybersecurity staff members have actually come from that particular division. Lawrence, email or via the chat. And then thank you, Corwin. And the Air Force of the services, I think are very, very much a leader in the space of survivability. This is not certainly, like I said, a new concept, but yeah, any resources that you all could provide that weren't mentioned here, or otherwise, you can submit requests via the IAC vehicle. We'd be happy to follow up with that. But for now, just in the interest of time, hopefully those were sufficient enough answers for the questions that you've had. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Dwayne. If you'd like to, there are a couple questions that were asked on Slido, but we'll, again, in the interest of time, kind of call it here. But maybe you can kind of take a look at those. If you have any comments on them, you can send them my way, and I'll make sure we get this out to everybody. And I didn't mention it earlier, but we have been recording this, so we'll make sure to put this on YouTube so it's available for anyone to watch at your convenience, and we'll send that link out after the fact. But otherwise, thank you all for joining. Thank you, Dwayne, for your time, and look forward to the next webinar.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.